Stories are not always what they seem. My name is Osajumebi, and every week I will tell you a short story written by a Nigerian writer or author. That's the long and short of it. So without much ado, this week's story is by Charles Kadib, and it's titled Him. The first thing he saw that day was a text from him. "I can't wait to see you," it had read, followed by the usual love and kisses emoji, which made you want to dance and squeal with delight. You could not believe that after 4 months of chats and video calls, after all the flirting and phone sex, you would finally be meeting him in the flesh. Just be careful, oh, your roommate had told you. There are many monsters out there. But you knew Chris was not a monster, and it wasn't just because you had fallen for him. Playboys and those shameless married men who usually played with women did not operate like he did. He had not even come into your inbox the way the others usually did, all sneaky and sly and reeking of lust from a mile away. The first contact had been to ask about the products on your social media stories. "Your bracelets and necklaces and statement pieces are so nice. How much do they cost?" And his first purchase had been close to 20 grand. He said he had a big family and wanted to get them something for Valentine. "Everyone deserves a Valentine, you know," he had typed. "I bet your girlfriend must be lucky to have a man like you," you had replied. "Why would you say that?" "Because you seem like a family guy. A man who can get his sisters and mother a Valentine's present must be a keeper. How sensitive." "Thank you. Incidentally, I don't have a girlfriend." "Liar." "I will not lie about a thing like this," he had responded, followed by an angry emoji. You had apologized, and his response had been non-committal. That was when you realized you were beginning to like him. He had touched a soft spot for you. Your last boyfriend had not been as romantic and sensitive. He had seen you as a piece of meat that should only be tenderized before it was plundered. That had affected your self-esteem and how you viewed your body. He also had not wanted children or a big family, the two things you really yearned for ever since your father died, and your brother relocated to another city with his wife and 2 children. You had been tired of feeling alone, and your ex always made you feel so alone. You were weary of men, so to help you decide whether to contact Chris again or not, you had stalked his wall. Unlike scammers, it was an old account with lots of personal information. There were pictures of him at work. It looked like a prestigious company, and he seemed well off. He drove a Toyota Venza, and his dress sense was on point. In one picture, he was shirtless, and his abs were to die for. You had saved that particular picture to your phone without understanding why. But what attracted you the most were the posts about his family. Different posts about his nieces, nephews, siblings, and parents, even his cousins. Everyone had his love, and before long, you had started to imagine joining such a large and loving family. 4 days after your slight altercation, you decided to DM him. You wanted to know how his family enjoyed his Valentine's presents. "They loved it. We really should do more business," he had responded. You wanted more than business, but you did not want to shoot your shot so early, so you played it cool. But you admitted enjoying scrolling through his profile. "Really? I have enjoyed scrolling through yours too," There was a wink emoji following his words, and for some reason, it had made you feel elated. The both of you started talking constantly after that, initiating the best 4 months of your life. You knew Chris, and he was sweet. Was it not Chris who had called you before anyone on your birthday last month? And when the supplier disappointed you after making you pay for the goods, was it not Chris who gave you the money to refund your clients to avoid public humiliation? And was it not also Chris who had called and encouraged you for over an hour when you were feeling so down? How could that Chris be a monster? Your roommates did not know what she was talking about. You were traveling out of town to see him. He had booked a nice hotel for you somewhere on the outskirts of the city where he lived. I don't want you dealing with the mad city traffic, he had said. You were touched. He had wanted to send you some money to cover your transportation, but you had refused. You were not one of those cheap girls who always scrounged off their men. And with how supportive he had been, you had not given him anything in return. It was only fair you paid your fare, as you were certain he wouldn't let you pay for anything during your visit. So you booked the flight with your money and bought a few gifts to surprise him with. The plan was for Chris to pick you up at the hotel, and you would both go out for a meal and some drinks, and then head back to the hotel room to get it on. As you walked into the hotel lobby, you discovered that pictures might be worth thousands of words, but none of his pictures had said enough. Chris was much better looking in person. You could not wait to see the rest of him and to run your fingers along his to die for abs. As the night wore on, your heart beat harder. Dinner had been a culinary masterpiece. Then he had told you he would like to take you back to his house, and you had smiled and agreed. You had been worried when he booked a hotel for you. You had been a little sad, thinking he was one of those married men who went online to deceive women after all. But now, his invitation eased your fears. He had nothing to hide. Your stomach had never had this much butterflies in them. He built the house from ground up, he had explained. He bought land in one of those new fast-developing areas on the outskirts of the city, which still had pockets of forests between the houses. You knew he worked hard, and you were proud of him and his achievements. You told him as much. At some point during dinner, you started feeling dizzy, and he reminded you of all the wine you had taken. Babe, you should not have had that many glasses of wine, he'd cooed, stroking your hands. You hadn't even realized that you'd drunk so much. It must have been the excitement of finally meeting him, the chance to touch him, and the anticipation of having him inside of you. He had settled the bill and helped you to his car, whispering sweet nothings as you went along. He'd blasted out of the car park and accelerated down the road like a man on a mission, his face becoming more intense as he drove. Surprising even yourself, you had put your hand on his thigh and moaned, "Babe, I want you inside of me." "We're almost there, my love. Very soon I will be inside of you." The last thing you remember was him caressing your hair with his free hand while his eyes never left the road. You imagine he is as turned on as you. Tonight is going to be epic, you think to yourself as you slowly drift off into sleep. When you wake up, you are in a dimly lit room. You are not on a bed, but lying on a roughly cemented floor. You are not alone, but you are not with him either. There are 3 other women seated on the floor. You notice a slight cut on one of your arms and it hurts. Your head aches and you still feel woozy. Staring at the women's faces sends chills down your spine. Fear and desperation silently screams back at you as they stare blankly. They are all gagged, tied up hand and foot and stripped to their underwear. That is when you realize that you are also gagged, tied hand and foot and stripped to your underwear. Thinking this to be a kidnapping, you are confused as you are not rich, neither are your parents. Then Oloturi flashes through your mind and you switch to thinking you are about to be trafficked abroad as a sex slave. Observing the women again, you notice no one is struggling. They seem to have accepted their fate. But you haven't, and you would rather die fighting than submit to a terrible fate like a meek lamb. The door bursts open and 2 men barge into the room. They are dressed like surgeons with scrubs, hairnets, and surgical gloves. They are stained from head to toe with blood, and muscles bulge from underneath their scrubs. They look about the room and move towards you. "This is her," one of them says. "She's the one who matched with the client abroad." In one fell swoop, the other man lifts you off the cold, hard floor and places you on his broad shoulders. They carry you out of the room and through a hallway which has 2 doors on either side. The air reeks of human flesh and blood seeps out from underneath the door of one of the rooms. The men are quiet as they march down the hall, carrying you along like a sack of beans. At the end of the hall, they walk into a spacious room, and you catch a glimpse of a large table in the middle with 2 other men, identically dressed. They are bending over a dissected body. One of the men has his hands in the depths of the carved-up body, eyebrows furrowed, feeling about desperately for something. Still dangling from broad shoulders, you lift your head slightly and see blood splattered and dripping from the transparent polythene sheet covering the table. And just beyond the table, you see bodies, dumped on the opposite side of the room. The 2 bodies facing you are hollow shells, empty and devoid of their usual vestigial organs. At the sight, your nostrils are awakened to the clinical smell of hospital equipment mixed with the putrid smell emanating from the vision before you. A wave of nausea hits, and the gastronomical feast you had relished a few hours before erupts all over the scrubs of the cold sculpted giant carrying you. He roars as he dumps you to the floor. "Fool!" he screams as he kicks you. From the table, the 2 men operating on the body react with anger. "Idiot! Don't you dare damage anything inside her!" bellowed the one who only seconds earlier had his hands buried in the cadaver. That is when you saw him, dressed in scrubs, hair in nets, surgical gloves on hands, just like the rest of them. He greets you with a smile and a nod, and raises his hands in a cynical wave. In one hand is a scalpel, and in the other a pair of scissors, both bloodied. You feel your heart crack slowly from betrayal and hurt. You remember the shirtless picture with abs to die for saved to your phone and the countless conversations thereafter. You remember the flirting and the phone sex, the depth of virtual intimacy and love exchanged. You remember your roommate's warnings, which you'd angrily shoved aside because you felt they were born out of jealousy. The love of your life comes over and fills you up, but not the way you ever imagined he would. There is no affection or desire in his touch. It is not sexual in the least. It is emotionless and cold, assessing to confirm everything within you is still intact. "We should get her heart out first," the other doctor said. "The client abroad has paid large sums for it." "Yes. Let us sedate her," the love of your life says, looking into your now distant eyes. I don't want her awake when I go inside of her. You must have liked this one. You took your time to bring her over. Standing up and heading back to the table, the love of your life responded. Yes, I liked her. She has a heart of gold. They all laugh at the pun and set about their business. Tears are rolling down your cheeks as your life ebbs away. You are wondering why you sent that damn message to his DM. But even now, all you can think of are the fun long chats and the first phone sex. You are thinking of the first time you saw him. You are thinking of dinner earlier, when he had lovingly touched you, and how his soft caress had felt so amazing you felt like you were going to burst. You are thinking of the many things that could have been, the many things that will never be. Charles Kadib is a freelance and fiction writer who resides in Port Harcourt, Rivers State. He is an avid reader but also enjoys stories anywhere they are found, especially in movies and music. You can read more of his work on Naira Pen and connect with him on X at Kadibia. Details and links will be in the episode description. If you've got a story you would like to be featured on this podcast, or a published book you want to make into an audiobook, send an email to info@osadumebi.com or send me a message at osadumebi on either Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or X. I look forward to collaborating with you. And if you've enjoyed this week's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and tell someone, everyone, that stories are a good escape for a few minutes each week.